If you are hearing phrases like ATF Gun Registry 2.0 or being flagged in the system, it is important to slow down and understand what people are actually talking about in real-world terms, not internet rumors or exaggerated interpretations. In the United States, firearm regulation is not controlled by a single universal list of gun owners. Instead, it is built on layers of systems, including background checks, dealer records, firearm tracing databases, and law enforcement access tools designed to support legal compliance and criminal investigations. When people use the word flagged, it usually does not mean a permanent label is placed on a person as a gun owner. In most cases, flagged refers to a temporary alert or a point of review within a background check system or an enforcement database. This can happen for many reasons, and most of them are not criminal in nature. It could be a name match issue, incomplete records, identity verification problems, prior legal history that requires additional review, or even simple administrative mismatches between databases. One of the most commonly referenced systems in firearm transactions is the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, often known as NICS. When someone attempts to purchase a firearm through a licensed dealer, the dealer submits a background check request through this system. The system checks various databases, including criminal records, immigration status where applicable, restraining orders, and other legally disqualifying factors defined under federal law. Most background checks are processed quickly and return an approval, a denial, or a delay. A delay does not automatically mean something is wrong. It simply means the system requires more time to verify information. This is one of the areas where the idea of being flagged often comes from. A delay might happen because records are incomplete, because multiple people share similar names, or because a deeper review is required to confirm identity. In some cases, the check may take longer due to system workload or data mismatches between state and federal records. It is also important to understand that firearm records in the United States are not stored in a single centralized registry of gun ownership. Federal law restricts the creation of a national gun registry. However, licensed firearm dealers are required to maintain records of sales, and those records can be reviewed by law enforcement under specific legal conditions, such as criminal investigations or firearm tracing requests. These records are not openly searchable by the public and are not designed as a real-time ownership database. When people talk about ATF systems or firearm tracking, they are often referring to investigative tools used for tracing firearms that are recovered at crime scenes. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives uses a system that allows law enforcement to trace a firearm from manufacturer to first retail sale, and sometimes beyond, depending on record availability. This tracing process is not automatic surveillance of all gun owners. It is a backward investigative tool used after a firearm is recovered. Now, when someone says a name gets flagged, it is important to separate perception from technical reality. A flag in a system typically means that a record requires review, or that an alert condition has been triggered based on matching criteria. For example, if a person with a similar name has a criminal record that could potentially disqualify firearm ownership, the system may require manual verification to confirm identity. This is not a determination of guilt or wrongdoing. It is a precautionary step. In some cases, firearm-related flags may involve legal restrictions. Federal law prohibits certain categories of individuals from purchasing or possessing firearms, including convicted felons, individuals under certain restraining orders, and people adjudicated as mentally incompetent by a court. If a background check identifies a potential match to these categories, the system may issue a denial or place the transaction under extended review. Again, this is not a new concept or a new registry, but part of long-standing legal structure. Another source of confusion comes from the difference between law enforcement databases and firearm purchase systems. Law enforcement databases may contain investigative records, warrants, or protective orders. These databases are separate from retail firearm purchase systems, but they can interact during background checks. When systems cross-reference data, mismatches or incomplete records can sometimes trigger additional screening. This can feel like being flagged, but in reality, it is often just a verification step. It is also worth addressing the fear that once a person is flagged, they are permanently tracked or monitored as a gun owner. That is not how these systems are designed. Background check records are generally not used as an ongoing surveillance tool. Each firearm purchase attempt is evaluated individually based on the information available at that time. A prior delay or review does not automatically create a permanent restriction unless a legal disqualification is established. However, there are situations where records can become more closely reviewed over time. If law enforcement encounters repeated identity mismatches, or if a person is frequently subject to background check delays due to record inconsistencies, administrative corrections may be required. This might involve updating court records, correcting name variations, or resolving identity conflicts between state and federal databases. These are administrative processes, not criminal penalties. Understanding how firearm compliance systems work also requires understanding their purpose. These systems are designed to enforce existing laws, not to create new categories of ownership tracking. They are intended to prevent prohibited transactions while allowing lawful gun purchases to proceed efficiently. Most firearm transactions in the United States are approved without issue, and delays or denials represent a small percentage of total checks. The idea of a Registry 2.0 often appears in online discussions, but it is not a formal legal system. What does exist are improvements in digital record keeping, faster database connections, and expanded electronic background check capabilities. As technology evolves, systems become more interconnected, which can create the impression of increased tracking. In reality, this is usually about improving accuracy and speed in verifying eligibility, not building a centralized list of gun owners. If someone is flagged in a firearm-related system, the immediate effect depends on the nature of the flag. In a background check scenario, it may result in a delay or denial. In an enforcement context, it may trigger further investigation or verification. But it is important to emphasize that flags are not always negative indicators. Many flags simply indicate that additional confirmation is required before a decision can be made. One of the most misunderstood aspects of firearm compliance systems is how often errors or mismatches occur. Data systems rely on records from multiple sources, including local courts, state databases, and federal records. If any of these records are incomplete or outdated, it can lead to confusion in identity matching. For example, common names, name changes, or clerical errors can all contribute to false matches. This is why manual review still plays a role in the process. Another important point is that firearm laws vary by state in addition to federal law. Some states have additional background check requirements, waiting periods, or licensing systems. These state-level systems may also contribute to the perception of increased scrutiny or flagging, especially when multiple layers of review are involved in a single transaction. From a compliance standpoint, licensed firearm dealers are required to follow strict procedures when conducting sales. They must verify identification, submit background check requests, and maintain transaction records as required by law. These records are not public databases of gun owners, but are retained for compliance and auditing purposes. In limited cases, they can be accessed by law enforcement during investigations or trace requests. It is also important to understand that being flagged does not automatically mean legal action is being taken. In most cases, it simply means a system has identified something that requires clarification. That clarification might come from updated records, additional identification, or confirmation from a relevant agency. In discussions about firearm systems, there is often concern about privacy and data security. These are valid topics, but it is also important to separate speculation from established legal structure. The current framework is designed with restrictions on how data can be used, who can access it, and under what conditions it can be shared. It is not a public access registry, and it is not intended to function as a real-time surveillance tool of lawful gun owners. Another key concept is firearm tracing. When a firearm is recovered by law enforcement, tracing can be used to determine its original sale point. This process involves contacting manufacturers and dealers to follow the paper trail of distribution. However, federal law restricts the creation of a searchable digital database of all firearm transactions. This means tracing is investigative and retrospective, not continuous monitoring. When people hear terms like system flag, registry, or ATF tracking, it can create the impression of a unified, constantly updated profile of gun owners. In reality, the system is fragmented across different agencies, jurisdictions, and record types. The complexity of this structure is one reason why delays and mismatches can occur, but also why the system relies heavily on verification rather than automatic assumptions. If we break down the real meaning of being flagged, it generally falls into a few categories: identity verification issues, potential legal disqualifications requiring review, administrative record mismatches, or system-generated alerts that require human confirmation. None of these automatically imply wrongdoing. They simply indicate that the system is not fully confident in an immediate automated decision. For individuals going through a firearm background check process, the most common experience remains straightforward approval. The system is designed to allow lawful transactions while filtering out prohibited ones. The majority of checks are completed within minutes. Only a smaller portion require extended review, and an even smaller portion result in denial based on legal criteria. The broader takeaway is that firearm compliance systems are administrative tools, not labeling systems. They do not assign permanent public flags in the way some online discussions suggest. Instead, they operate through temporary checks, record verification, and legal criteria evaluation. While the system is complex and sometimes frustrating due to delays or errors, it is not a unified registry tracking every gun owner in real time. Understanding this distinction is important because misinformation often turns technical processes into exaggerated claims. When people hear Registry 2.0, it is usually a rhetorical or speculative phrase, not an official system name. When people hear flagged, it is often a procedural alert, not a permanent status. In conclusion, the key point is this: firearm background check and enforcement systems are built around verification, not labeling. Being flagged typically means needs review, not identified as a target. And while systems are becoming more digital and interconnected over time, they still operate under legal restrictions that prevent the creation of a universal public gun ownership registry. Disclaimer: this content is for informational and educational purposes only. It does not represent legal advice, official policy, or confirmation of any government system or registry. Firearm laws and background check procedures vary by jurisdiction and may change over time. Always consult official government sources or a qualified legal professional for accurate and up-to-date guidance.